Truth did something yesterday. They're not going to do anything today again.
The documentarians are actually here today, is our understanding. Is that not correct?
What?
The people who actually made the documentary.
I don't know.
Okay, so-
I'm not even sure what. Are you talking about the Pandora's Black Box?
Yes.
Wittenberg, Balsamo.
Wittenberg was here yesterday. They showed they had something going on in I don't know whether it was a theater or the dialogue room yesterday. I'm not sure. Or I even heard that they were in the pavilion. They were everywhere. Do we need them again? I don't think so.
Okay, well, the question
Well-
is, it was on the schedule for them to be on today?
It was not on the schedule. That schedule became extinct yesterday, okay? We tore it up. So I don't want to hear any more about that orange that yellow schedule that is like just tear it up and throw it away, okay? There's one out on the wall. Out on the wall is a schedule. And I'm also reading what's on the schedule today. What we have, in addition to what's going on in this room and in the pavilion, we have the strategy workshops. Everyone is allowed to attend one strategy workshop. Limited seating to 20 people maximum. Okay, the strategy workshops are as follows. Right now, we have, between 9 and 10 o'clock this morning, up in the Clark, they're all in the Clark Gable room. You can sign up for them right out here. There's a sign-up sheet, but you don't really have to. You just show up in the Clark Gable room, which is opposite, right next to the theater. All right, you show up there. Right now, we've got outreach, and Carol Brule, I hope she's up there talking to some people. Anyway, that one's going on, and then at 10, and then we have a break. They go on for an hour between 9 and 10, 10:15 to 11:15. We have winning the political game with Ernie Hancock. Anyway, he's going to be there and be facilitating, and the idea is to come up with the best political strategies we can move forward with in that one. The one with the outreach is about outreach strategies. All right. At 11:30, we have media activism. We had one yesterday with a couple people showed up. There was some confusion about, how to do this thing. So it was Jennifer Parisi was in there yesterday from Colorado, and I put her on here to kind of facilitate that again today. If she's around, I've given you a task. So anyway, she's probably here somewhere. She'll find out, I guess. Anyway, and that's between 11:30 and 12:30. And then at 12:45, there's 15 minutes between each one of these. At 12:45 to 1:45, we have legal actions, again, with Phil Berg. I hope Phil will conduct it a little bit better and facilitate it instead of letting it get out of control like he did yesterday. Phil,
What?
you did a bet.
Right here. What am I doing?
Oh, there you are. Oh, Phil. Okay, we want to do that same legal actions again. But we have to come up with some solutions, and don't let Carl take it away.
Okay.
Carl's going to show up with duct tape over his mouth, aren't you, Carl?
What time are we doing that?
That's at 12:45 to 1:45, and the idea is to develop at least a couple really good strategies. And then we're going to present all these strategies this afternoon at, I believe it's at 12:45. 12:45 today, right here.
Where? Here?
Right here, we're gonna talk about the results of these strategy sessions for an hour and a half, and each of the facilitators in each of these sessions will bring up their strategies, and I'm gonna kind of moderate that.
So the legal panel, which we're doing, okay, what room is that in, so I can announce that again?
Okay, like I said, the strategy sessions are all in the Clark Gable room. Okay, it's up next to the theater. Okay, and limited seating, 20 people maximum. You pick the one that you really think that you are the most suited for. You have the most ideas for. You don't go to each and every one of them. You go to one. All right, now I am wearing a T-shirt. All right, really nice T-shirt. These sell for $15. We bought 300 of these. All right. I don't want to have to sell these for the next 5 years. Okay, folks. If you really like this conference, and also you can do something else, you can become a sponsor of this conference. And then there's some words on the back here. It says, I sponsor of the 9/11 Accountability Conference down at the bottom. And you become a sponsor by contributing anywhere from $50 up to $20,000. Any 20,000 contributors here? Anyway, it's all listed on the website, and we'll have some stuff printed out here. Just wanted to let you know. Also, wanted to let you know that our vendors are feeling kind of lonely over there. They're talking to each other, but they don't have a lot of people over there buying things, okay? So let's show our vendors how much we care. And we got some great T-shirts, bumper stickers, books, you name it, whatever over there, okay?
And I have a clarification question.
Yes.
It sounded to me like at 12:45 today, the legal action is in Clark Gable, but also here in the ballroom at 12:45 is something else. And what is that?
Okay.
That's not clear.
She's Barbara's asking me about what's going on here at 12:45. At 12:45, yeah. At 12:45 today, not 12:45. Let me see. Well, at 12:45 we're having lunch, but not here. It's at some
So
restaurant.
there's nothing that conflicts with the legal action at 12:45.
No,
You mentioned the summary. When is the summary start? 2 o'clock?
the summary for that is 2:45.
For everybody?
For everybody.
Here,
Everybody's going to be here, and we're going to talk about. There's 6 strategy sessions, and we're going to talk about the results of each and every one of them and how we can move forward.
You made a mistake. You said 12:45. On both.
2:45.
Okay, 2:45.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
No problem.
You know,
All right.
a lawyer. You know, he's correcting me. You know how lawyers are. Yeah. Right. That's good. Okay. Okay. All right. Anyway. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Victor. Oh, I wanted to say I hired several lawyers for my cow crap case, which some of you have heard about. Of all my lawyers, I had all these incompetent lawyers. Boy, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of incompetent lawyers out there, almost all of them. I found one, finally, that knew what he was doing. Here he is, Mark Victor. This guy knows something about being a lawyer. Anyway, I give you Mark Victor. There you go, Mark.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And thanks to Kent for asking me to come here. And I think my role here is to give just a brief overview of just what a grand jury is. You're going to hear from a panel that's going to discuss grand juries. It's true. I plead guilty. I am a criminal defense attorney. I do state cases, federal cases, mostly felonies, but also some misdemeanors. And I've been in practice 13 years and done an awful lot of different types of cases. And by the way, I do have my business cards on the back table outside the room. And on the back of those cards, some of you already know, are the magic words that I think you should say to the agent of the state who comes and intrudes in your world on that day, which will probably come for all of you, because you do indeed live in America where the government wants to interfere with your life. Those are on the back table there. So anyways, let me talk a little bit about what a grand jury is for those of you who don't know. First of all, there are federal grand juries and there are state grand juries. Federal prosecutions that are felonies have to proceed by a grand jury. You can't just simply file a complaint. A prosecutor can't just draft up a complaint and take a case all the way to a verdict without a grand jury. And a grand jury is essentially 16 to 23 people drawn from the community, the same types of safeguards that are in place for regular petit juries that we have for criminal cases. And 12 or more of those people listen to the evidence, and 12 or more are needed to return what's called an indictment. Indictment's just simply the charging document. And a grand jury would sit in the federal case for up to 18 months, and it could be extended for maybe 6 months max. In the state, it's a little bit different. I can only talk about Arizona because that's where I practice, and that's where we are, so we'll talk about Arizona very briefly. The state has an option different than the federal government has. The state can just simply file a complaint or an information. They file that in court, and you're charged with a felony. Real easy for a prosecutor. You have a probable cause hearing after that called a preliminary hearing, which serves the same function as a grand jury. The state can also proceed by grand jury, and they oftentimes do. Here in Maricopa County, I think my observation is that the more serious cases proceed by grand jury. So what happens in the state is usually 12 people are chosen from the pool of citizens, and they get together. They're on the grand jury, and then 9 or more of those people, if they find probable cause, then they return an indictment. Now, here's what's supposed to be the case with grand juries. Grand jury, the notion was, well, kind of like regular juries. This is supposed to be a check against sort of a hasty prosecution, a malicious prosecution, an oppressive prosecution. That was the concept. The founders thought, gee, we don't want to give that kind of power to the government just to let them go ahead and start charging people with all kinds of crimes. So what we'll do is we'll get a pool of citizens together and let them listen to the evidence. They can be kind of like the final check before someone is charged. Similar to a jury in a criminal case, where, remember, we all know about jury nullification. We used to have that. We still should, but we don't. And the notion there is that the jury would listen to the evidence, and even if the state was able to prove all the elements of the crime, the jury could still say, you know what, given the circumstances, we're still not going to convict. Now, they can do that today, but we just can't tell them about that, and it bothers me every time I try a case. So that's what's supposed to be the case with the grand juries. But it's really not that way today. This is my opinion. Most of our system is adversarial. I'm on one side representing the citizen, the accused, and then there's the government on the other side, and they're presenting the evidence one way, and I'm presenting it a different way, and with this adversarial system, the truth comes to light. The grand jury is an exception to that. The grand jury is an inquisitorial system. Sounds like something you would expect out of Saudi Arabia, not from the United States. It's not adversarial. The accused gets no notice. You don't get any notice of it. It's a secret proceeding. There's no discovery that's afforded to the accused. The accused isn't entitled to be present at the grand jury. They don't get to present any information at the grand jury. The only players there at the grand jury is the prosecutor, the prosecutor's witness, who can testify to all kinds of hearsay, i.e., the witness can say, yeah, I spoke to Bob, who spoke to Joe, who spoke to James, and James said the following. They present that kind of slop to a grand jury. So there's the prosecutor, the witness, a court reporter, and the grand jury. No judge, no defense attorney, no defendant. They hear a one-sided presentation. They do have very, very broad investigative powers. They're not restrained by the evidence rules. They can issue all kinds of subpoenas for all kinds of things, for records. They can, if you're a target of their investigation, they can issue a subpoena to get you to speak a voice exemplar and measure that against maybe a known sample. They could take your hair samples. They could put you in a lineup. Now, if you're the target of this, you can refuse to testify because you have a Fifth Amendment right, both the state and in the federal system. So if you're the target, you can refuse. But if you're just a mere witness, you're probably going to testify. Some might say that the grand jury is simply a rubber stamp. I might be one of those. Interestingly enough, there was a senior district judge, Judge William Campbell from the Northern District of Illinois. This is his quote. Grand jury can indict anybody, anytime, for almost anything. Now, of course, that's if the government wants it done. This is a panel about the citizens want it done. And so you'll see that there's much more difficulty when the citizens want it done versus when the government wants it done. And then also, once someone is indicted, once that document is returned from the grand jury, which incidentally, the grand jury doesn't sit down and draft up an indictment. What happens is the prosecutor says, oh, I have a draft indictment for your consideration, something they've typed out, something they've put down where they want the defendant to be charged, and then they hand that to the foreperson of the grand jury, who sometimes just simply, they take a vote and they sign it, and that's that. But these things can't be dismissed. I can't attack them. And if you're charged with a crime as a result of a grand jury from an indictment, you can't attack that indictment and say it should be dismissed because there wasn't enough evidence. You just simply can't. They've taken that off the table. You can only attack these things to say something was procedurally done wrong. It was a biased presentation. It was an unfair presentation. The people who were on the grand jury, there was some problem with the way they were picked. That's it. And so the reality is, most of the time, when there's an indictment returned, you're going to be facing a charge. So that's a little bit of an overview. Today, like I said, this is going to be slightly different. I've been talking about my perspective as a criminal defense attorney, what a grand jury does. And that's what a grand jury does in virtually every case. It's the state that brings the charges, or in the federal system, the federal government brings the charges against the individual, and the grand jury is there to hear that, to determine if there's probable cause to bring a charge. This panel is going to be sort of the reverse of that. This panel is about when a case where the citizens want charges brought, and what can the citizens do to get an indictment to issue from a grand jury. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Pence, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that right now we are actually live streaming this particular program on the net internationally. And those of you who were here yesterday, we wanted to let you know that the technology now exists to live stream, and we will be using this very technology for our upcoming National People's Grand Jury on the crimes of 9/11, the case to indict. And while this television show, this program is going on, there will be polling going on with the people in our virtual grand jury audience. So when we do a citizens grand jury, a people's grand jury on the crimes of 9/11, we will both have grand juries on a local basis and a virtual grand jury. And we'll be talking about the structure of that a little bit later in terms of what our plan is. So right now, there are 12 questions that are polls that the people who are watching our show are able to take. And we have the ability to teleconference right now from multiple cities simultaneously, which would be like a teleconference. And we have the ability from multiple cities to have witnesses, to have interactions from juries, and to have what are called precedents of findings taking place. What I want to do is to distinguish what the gentleman just indicated. I happen to be a descendant of one of America's founding fathers. He was the deciding vote for the state of Virginia's adoption of the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is something near and dear to my heart. As you all know, we have had many different results since 9/11, not the least of which is the presumption of legality of the laws that presumably have taken away many of your Bill of Rights. We're going to suggest to you that, in truth, no right can be taken away from you, the citizens of this country, without an amendment to the Constitution. Since no amendment occurred, those laws are in fact illegal and unconstitutional, and we the people need to take a stand in a series of processes in order to reverse that. But thank you. I want to back it up one step. As you all know, the Constitution was constructed obviously, the first three portions of it were about the administration, the legislature, and the judiciary. Everyone knows that. The fourth branch of government the founders intended were the rights of the people to be the fourth branch of government, and that is demonstrated in the Bill of Rights, which concretized or codified the sovereign, inalienable rights of the people prior to them being citizens at all. That in fact we have inalienable rights that cannot be taken away, were granted by our Creator, and this government was founded in order to support and empower we the people to have a government, as you all know, of, by, and for the people. In the Fifth Amendment, this is something that's little known or dealt with. In contrast to what you just heard, the Fifth Amendment says, literally, that no one can be held without a presentment or an indictment by a grand jury. A presentment is literally an independently investigated, separate from the government, independently responded to, which is to say their findings are independent of a district attorney. And we have the ability to do that, and the intention of that clearly was so that we could hold our government accountable. And if you'll even look in the Seventh Amendment, it says essentially about common law. And the common law articulated, once again, our sovereign rights as citizens, and that we can try a case by common law, and if it is tried by common law, it cannot be redone in any other kind of court. So the founders' intention was for us to be empowered so that we don't have the kind of tyranny that we're experiencing right now. In 2004, citizens, the people of the city of Los Angeles came together at a Patriotic Hall in Los Angeles, and basically they made this declaration as they had a town hall and voted literally to select their own, essentially common law, grand jury representatives in order to review the potential indictments. And basically what we did was that we looked at the official story and basically did an indictment against the official story the official story of 9/11. I just want to give you a few of those highlights, and then we're going to go into more detail about what else occurred and is occurring. Basically, we began by saying, we the people of the United States, these are the findings or the presentment of findings of the grand jury that gathered in 2004 and 2005. Basically, they said, we the people of the United States, having considered the devastating consequences of the deliberate failure of all government, jurisprudence, and media oversight to establish truth and accountability for the crimes of September 11th, 2001, and the official cover-up that followed, drawing upon common law and the Fifth Amendment for precedent and authority, duly elected and convened a citizens' grand jury, and reviewed evidence and rendered their findings. Let me just give you a few highlights of that. The background and declaration stated that the Bush administration created an official story that purported to explain the truth about what actually happened on 9/11 and the subsequent anthrax attacks. That, as you know, was promulgated by various official commissions, dossiers, and reports, including the Keene-Hamilton 9/11 Commission report in July of 2004. However, all these official commissions, dossiers, and reports, number one, refused to consider evidence contrary to the Bush administration's official explanation, or, in fact, distorted evidence to conform to it. Number two, they all, across the board, ignored obvious suspects by failing to consider who had the means, motive, and opportunity to accomplish all that took place. Three, they determined it was outside their mandate to establish legal responsibility or any accountability for the blatant disregard of standard operating procedures and inexplicable negligence that permitted, if not caused, the atrocity of 9/11/2001. 9/11, as you all know, served to terrorize the American people into supporting an endless war on terror, an erosion of our constitutional rights, and a fundamental shift in our economic resources and political priorities, while greatly profiting some individuals and institutions financially and politically. We, the people, declare It is our mandate, number one, to expose 9/11 as a strategically designed pretext for war and profit, a self-inflicted, pre-planned attack on the American people and citizens from 82 other countries. Number two, it is our mandate to identify individual and institutional responsibility, not only for the events of 9/11, but the insider trading that preceded it, the subsequent anthrax attacks, and the cover-up that followed. Number three, it is our mandate to assure prosecution of such parties to the fullest extent of domestic and international criminal and civil law, including but not limited to political condemnation here in the United States and around the world. When we did a summary of the findings, essentially, they said, and you've heard the evidence throughout this weekend, as the scholars have unveiled it, as we have previewed here on our boards. Essentially, the conclusion was that given that vast bodies of evidence were ignored or distorted, as we all know, David Ray Griffin indicated and outlined 115 overt omissions and distortions that were not a part of, or that were an integral part of the 9/11 Commission report. And the nature, and given that, in addition, the nature and complexity of the events were far beyond the ability of the 19 alleged so-called hijackers to accomplish unaided. The 9/11 Commission report and the Bush administration's official story explaining the events of 9/11 are hereby rejected. Henceforth, they shall be considered propaganda fabrications designed to favor the unleashing of aggressive war while hiding the activity of a private, extra-legal, anti-constitutional network of treasonous individuals at the highest levels of the United States and perhaps other governments, including high-ranking military officials, mercenaries, and individuals within private corporations, mainstream media, and political institutions. All who actively prepared, promoted, or passively favored September 11th attacks and or supported the cover-up that has followed. Next, the events of 9/11 from that point forward shall be addressed not as an outside terrorist attack upon America, but in fact an interrelated high crime that happened within America, where motive, means, and opportunity must be considered and no suspect ignored or given immunity, no matter where they reside or what rank or official position that they held before, on, or since 9/11/2001. As you know, many of the perpetrators of 9/11 were in fact given medals and or awards, and not one person has been held accountable for the gross criminal negligence and blatant breaking of standard operating procedures. If one individual had been murdered and one suspect existed, in a traditional sense, a grand jury would have been created, and in fact, no criminal investigation has happened for 5 years. And so basically what we have declared, given the historical additional precedents of false flag operations and that had been created or allowed to happen as pretext for war, and 9/11 has those same characteristics, and given that obvious and very dangerous association is now apparent, as you've heard, with what occurred on 7/7 in London, in Spain, etc., between the practice of war games, mass casualty emergency exercises, and other drills, and the actual terrorist event themselves, we, the people, therefore, declare that government complicity in 9/11 is probable in ways not yet fully determined. Finally, significant evidence exists that other 9/11 events are being planned to justify the invasion of Iran and or other countries, and or to distract political attention away from efforts to hold the guilty parties accountable for these and other crimes. You can see the full presentments of the Citizens Grand Jury on the crimes of 9/11 if you go to www.911truthla.us. Finally, our question we're opening to all of you and the grand jury pose this to the world. If our own government or governments, military and civilians, are indeed guilty of perjury, treason, destruction of property, mass murder of our own citizens, and guilty of high crimes against humanity, and they are in charge of the very investigations that find themselves innocent, what are we, the people, to do? This is where we are. 2007 is a revolutionary time in which we, the people, must confront the seriousness of where we are, take a collective stand, and we're going to be talking about the strategies, including an international, live, interactive, people's grand jury on the crimes of 9/11, the case to indict, where individuals, specifically since the district attorneys in the areas where they should have pursued a grand jury, and the state attorney general in the state of New York were given extensive legal briefs to request formally a grand jury, were completely ignored. We, ladies and gentlemen, are in a constitutional crisis. And the intention of our founding fathers was to remind us, wake up, wake up. This government is your government, and we must reclaim the power we've allowed to be given away, and we must use the media, our collective media, in order to accomplish that. So what we're going to be doing today is discussing our strategies as we go along. I want to introduce very briefly, Kathleen, if you would just talk about what happened in 1948.
Lynn, could you just briefly introduce all the panelists?
Oh, please, I apologize. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much. On our panel today, we have down here Bill Veal, who is for 25 years just an amazing defense and public defender. Who will be functioning today, is going to do a mini demonstration of how he might cross-examine Vice President Cheney on were we to assert, and we will, that our people's grand jury, consistent with common law and the Fifth Amendment, has valid subpoena power. Which includes, we will be inviting those whistleblowers and people who have been suppressed by gag orders to formally ignore those gag orders, because we, the people, say those gag orders are not for national security, as we've been told, but in fact to obstruct justice. And we, the people, will not stand for it any longer. So Bill will be doing a demonstration on that. I have to my left Barbara Honegger, who has been instrumental with me in creating the citizens' grand juries. And Barbara is, as you have heard yesterday, is the author of October Surprise, the first public resignation of conscience from the Reagan-Bush administration, and is just an extraordinary currently a military affairs journalist. And Barbara will be talking to us about not only a little bit about the history, but more importantly, what it is we're doing, what it is we're suggesting, what our strategy will go from here. My partner in the founding of 9/11truthla.us, Kathleen Rosenblatt, also was the co-producer of our Citizens Grand Jury on the crimes of 9/11, and we're going to have her come up briefly to tell you what has happened. What happened since the founders intended us to be able to have presentments? How did it get to be where we are right now, which is what the attorney who opened up today told you about. And that is basically, if a district attorney or the state doesn't sign it off, a grand jury in practicality has no power. To my right is the just amazing Phil Berg, who was a former Deputy Attorney General for the state of Philadelphia. Pennsylvania. Sorry, it's early, or it was late last night. Anyway, and Phil has just been an amazing mouthpiece for citizen responsibility and legal accountability, and initiated 2 RICO cases against perpetrators of 9/11, and he's here to talk to you just briefly about that, but more importantly, where we go from here in terms of legalities. And finally, down on the right, a new friend, Paul McConnell, it is, yes?
No, St. John.
St. John. I'm sorry, Paul St. John will be talking with you about a strategy that is part of our integral strategy, which will include a new People's Commission on 9/11 that will be happening in July, which will be leading also into some grassroots We the People action, which is what we're all committed to, which will lead into our August People's Grand Juries on the crimes of 9/11, leading into September 11th, the 6th anniversary of 9/11, and the window of political action we're encouraging We the People to do that will end on September the 17th, which is Constitution Day in this country, and will then be followed by a stand that we're inviting not only our movements across the country. If we have the People's Commission results and the People's Grand Jury results, those representatives that are up for election, if they do not support the people being able to have accountability, then we will systematically withdraw our support and say you do not represent us any longer. So he will be sharing a bit of that strategy. So without further ado, Kath, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kathleen Rosenblatt. I'm an acupuncturist from Los Angeles, and as you see, we've been working a long time on trying to bring out some kind of strategy to take this further than where we've been. And we've done these 2 grand juries in the past with Webster Tarpley, Jim Hoffman, Barbara Honegger, and Don Paul. And then our second one, we had a live phone-in by David Ray Griffin to help present all the information that we have all accumulated. And we want to continue that, continuing with accumulating more information, of course, but trying to create a case that we all agree on, even while we are continuing to delve further into some of the obscurities of the possible hows and whys, et cetera. We do have a case, and that's what we want to try to inspire all the various cities and all the various groups to come together, and let's push this forward before it's too late, before other things happen and it becomes irrelevant. So what I'd like to talk about right now is a little bit of the history, because we're not just fighting 9/11. We are trying to rescue and resuscitate and salvage this 4th branch of government known as the grand jury system. And it's amazing how rooted it was in the common law and in the 5th and 7th Amendment, and it was done away with in 1946, as you will see when I share a little bit of the history. There's a wonderful article by a man named Roger Roots in the Creighton Law Review. It's called, "If It's Not a Runaway, It's Not a Real Grand Jury." And we mentioned this, we talked about this at the Chicago event, where we also had a very similar panel, and it's also written up in the Global Outlook, the last 2 issues, which are sort of copies of the same issue. And this article appeared in the 1999-2000 Creighton Law Review, where this attorney, Roger Roots, traces the history of the grand jury system as it was intended by the framers of the Bill of Rights and the common law. And, but it was subverted by this tiny little ruling that appeared at a very weak moment in history, 1946, when we were all rather sensitive to fear, and we all fell for this 1946 legislative lie of epic proportions. But even before that occurred, after that occurred, Supreme Court Justice Powell stated in 1974, "The institution of the grand jury is deeply rooted in Anglo-American history. In England, since the Magna Carta, the grand jury served as a protector of citizens against arbitrary and oppressive government action." So in this country, the founders knew that the grand jury was so essential to be a check on the government, because they understood that governments have a tendency to become corrupt. And so in the 5th Amendment, it says, "No person can be held or incarcerated to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless instituted by a presentment or indictment." Now, a presentment is the formal statement. But this fundamental right has been obfuscated completely by the current president's arbitrary label of enemy combatant, which was rubber-stamped by Congress and codified in the Patriot Act and justified by 9/11 and the War on Terror. Roots confirms that the Constitution intended to give the grand jury the power to instigate criminal charges, to be a people's watchdog, with broad powers to investigate and to operate at direct odds with both judges and officials, to even exclude them from their presence at certain times. That's how powerful it was supposed to be. The function of the grand jury was to ferret out government corruption. That was its primary purpose. All grand juries were supposed to be runaways. They were all supposed to be independent. They were operating completely independently, and they were self-directing bodies of inquisitors. And then these findings were reflected in presentments. But then the big change came in 1946 with the adoption of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, which declared that independently acting grand juries were now obsolete and thus presumed illegal in practice. And they denied the future generations of what had been a well-established, recognized power of unrestrained investigation of independent declarations and findings. And the reason they did this, or their rationalization, was that this usage of presentments might encourage runaway grand juries, where they might act on their own knowledge and observation and not charges from a U.S. attorney. So thus, today's presentments are no longer recognized by the federal judiciary, and this legislative lie is yet to be challenged in the highest court. Since then, grand juries have been dependent, not independent, upon the prosecutor to issue their indictments. So this is a willful subversion of a well-settled law. So this is an assault on the grand jury as an institution, and a total coup d'etat. In spite of this, ironically, it was the ultimately neoconservative Justice Antonin Scalia who effectively codified the unique independent power of this fourth branch of government when he delivered the opinion of the court in 1992. He was discussing the power and unique independence of grand juries when he said, rooted in long centuries of Anglo-American history, the grand jury is mentioned in the Bill of Rights, but not in the body of the Constitution. It has not been textually assigned, therefore, to any of the branches described in the first three articles. It is a constitutional fixture in its own right. Yet in practice, today's grand juries function basically at the whim of the prosecutor. And that's what we need to change. We need to take this back if we can get enough of a groundswell of support from many cities. And so what we are trying to do is do an outreach in Hollywood. We have contacted many celebrities and many prominent writers and producers of films to be on our grand jury, to bring this out to the people so that this can be recognized by the average citizen who has no idea that they had a fourth branch of government. So that's why it is very, very important to get funding, to get a groundswell, a commitment from many, many different cities, which we already have. We have about 16 cities that would like to be online with us and creating this national and international grand jury. There are people in London that are already planning one for August. We have people in Mumbai, formerly Bombay, India, who would like to be online, and there's other cities as well across Europe and the United States. So we hope that you will all be inspired to stay in touch with us and to work towards creating an event that we can all share. Thank you.
And if we strongly encourage, because we started half an hour late here today, given what's happening here in the conference, that you join us at 12:45, from 12:45 to 1:45 in the Clark Gable room, so we can actually create the strategies. As Kathleen mentioned, we have Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, we have Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Seattle, Miami, New York City, and many others who are online to do this collective, never done before. Imagine, it's really we, the people of the world, because 9/11 did not just happen to Americans, but to citizens from 82 other countries, not to mention the outflow of what occurred in Afghanistan and Iraq and possibly beyond that. So it's we, the people of the world, taking responsibility for this horrible experience that we're all sharing, this trauma. I want to introduce now Barbara, and I'm going to ask Barbara to just continue with a bit about the grand juries and anything else you'd like to say with regard to what we're up to now. Thank you. Barbara Honegger.
Does this come off? No, it doesn't. Thank you so much. There are two major areas that I'd like to cover briefly. The first is I want to impress upon you from my own personal experience, and what I'm about to tell you I actually have on audio tape, so you don't have to take my word for it. I want to give you a little bit of the history of Anglo-American law, just so that you understand, if you can imagine the tradition that the American justice system and legal system comes from and grew out of is, of course, the British, the Anglo system of law. And if you think of the British system as a pyramid or a mountain, the monarch is at the top, and up until the Magna Carta, which was a very long time ago, almost a millennium ago. But in any case, up until the Magna Carta, all political power and sovereignty was focused in the monarch and the king. Very rarely a queen. Today we have a queen, but the monarch, the king. And at Runnymede with the Magna Carta, just the very top level, the very highest level of the elite of the aristocracy joined together and confronted the power of the king, and were able to effectively take some power away from the king, and that is the Magna Carta. Now, essentially the history of, just in a nutshell, the history of British political history after the Magna Carta was 1215, long time ago. June 14th.
June 15th, my birthday.
June 15th, June 14th or 15th, cut the difference depending upon the time zone between here and Britain. But in any case, it was 1215. And essentially the history of the Anglo legal tradition after that was a struggle by the people of Britain, of England, to have more political power and sovereignty effectively move down that pyramid, that socioeconomic pyramid. And they essentially were only able to achieve the next major step in that direction by literally beheading the king, King Charles. And the next thing that happened after to bring political authority and sovereignty down, all the way down the hierarchy to the base of society, was the American Revolution. After the colonists came to this country, the grand juries, most people don't know this, but the grand jury system in the American colonies was absolutely fundamental to the success of the American Revolution. In many of the colonies, there were not just grand juries, but elected grand juries. Town meetings were called, local town meetings. You could think of those as kind of a town or a county level. People would come from the surrounding area. There would be yearly or bi-yearly town meetings. And at those town meetings, they would actually elect 23 to 25 members from the town meeting to be the sitting grand jury for that year or that 6-month period. And that was basically the court. That was the judicial system. Now, believe it or not, before the American Revolution, and I invite you all to read a magnificent book called The People's Panel, which goes into this history that I'm telling you in a nutshell. But it's the best book on it. But the American Revolution effectively succeeded because when the American colonists started rebelling against the acts of the crown here in this country on the East Coast, the British who were present here in America on the East Coast would try to arrest individuals who were leaders of the American Rebellion, and one of them was Paul Revere. And the British so respected the grand jury tradition that they actually took the Paul Revere into the grand jury, and the elected people's grand jury refused to indict him and let him free. So whenever the British would try to arrest one of the leaders of the American Revolution, the elected grand juries would say, no, we're going to let him go. And that was one of the major reasons that the revolution succeeded, because our leaders were set free to continue the revolution. Now, I just want you to know that, and of course then we had the American Revolution, as I mentioned yesterday, the Boston Tea Party, which was December 16th of 1773. The Boston Tea Party was the trigger event for the American Revolution. And just this last December 16th, we, the 9/11 Truth Movement, recreated the Boston Tea Party in Boston and in cities all across the country simultaneously by throwing physical copies and mock copies of the 9/11 Commission report as a symbolic act literally into Boston Harbor at the precise place where the tea was thrown into Boston Harbor. And at historic Faneuil Hall, we declared that this past December 16th, 2006, we declared that the 9/11 Truth Movement had then officially become the 9/11 Truth Revolution. And so we have taken on the mantle of our founding fathers in a very conscious way, and the Boston Tea Party will be recreated every single year, and we invite you to go to that. I'm going to move on to just one more point, so to bring into your attention the seriousness of the constitutional crisis we are in. You may not, it's hard to believe this, but I know this for a fact, and I have it on audio tape for anyone who wants to hear it. This administration, using 9/11 as the pretext, consciously has the intention not just to subvert the American grand jury system, which by a decision of the United States Supreme Court was officially declared the fourth independent people's branch of the government, co-equal with the presidency, the courts, and the Congress. Just imagine. The grand jury system in the United States, because it is in the Bill of Rights, has been declared by an official act of the Supreme Court of the United States as a fourth branch, official branch of government. This administration, using 9/11 as the pretext, the current Attorney General of the United States, Alberto Gonzales, I have him on audio tape stating that he realizes that the people of the United States will experience discomfort when they realize that the actions that the administration has, in quotes, to take as a result of the attacks of 9/11, that he realizes that it is an assault on Anglo-American legal tradition. The intent of Alberto Gonzales, the current Attorney General of the United States, is effectively to overturn all of American Anglo legal tradition. I can prove that to you. We are in a serious constitutional crisis. We must have a citizens' grand jury. We must revitalize the fourth people's branch of government that our own United States Supreme Court has said is a co-equal branch of government with the other three. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. I want you to remember the historical context in which the people took a stand against the oppressors by not allowing Paul Revere to be incarcerated. This is the power of the people. We are now being told that any one of us, with no justification, can be declared enemy combatants, and for political purposes or any other reason, and merely called us an enemy combatant of the state. It is incumbent upon we the people to understand we have the power to say, no, this is not acceptable, we will not stand for it, and we invite you to let your family, your friends, and the world know that those who are standing up for your liberties, our liberties, and the truth, and demanding accountability for the crimes of 9/11, are in fact those that should be supported, and in fact are the ones who are reaffirming liberty and are saying, give us liberty or give us death. And it is that crucial because our American democracy, our republic, is dying before our very eyes. I want to introduce now Phil Berg. And we're going to take just a bit of a shift because given this is both the citizens' grand jury / people's grand jury on the crimes of 9/11, it is also the legal panel. I want to just move in and have Phil briefly tell you about his amazing RICO cases and the status of that, and then how he is integral to our upcoming people's grand jury on the crimes of 9/11. And then we have some important other things. We're asking that just as we were held back a half an hour, that we push back the authors panel as well. And we ask you to bear with us on that, and thank you for your indulgence in the shift in the schedule. Phil Berg.
Thank you very much. I know many of you from many events, and first off, we have to thank all of you for your participation, not only here, but in what you've done through the Internet, because I really believe if we didn't have the Internet, we wouldn't be here today, and we would not be where we are as far as the investigative material that has brought us to this point for the Citizens Grand Jury, or for my case, in fact. Thank you. Thank everybody. Just brief on myself, I'm a former Deputy Attorney General of Pennsylvania. We haven't declared Philadelphia State yet, Lynn, but I also, politically, I've run for several offices, but the political parties don't want me because they can't control me. Probably the biggest political mistake I made in life is the fact that I should have kissed butt years ago, got elected, and then told him to go frick himself. But I've been telling everyone to go frick himself since I'm about 16 years of age. And I think many of you have, because, we're considered activists, and I really get taken back when I see there was a headline in the paper about our conference here about conspirator theorists getting together. The conspirator theory, in my opinion, was 100% put out by the Bush administration and held. It deserved that. And unfortunately, our free press has played with them. About 4 or 5 months ago, when George Bush, the resident, was questioning the free press by Putin in Russia, I laughed. And I started putting out a press release, but I said they wouldn't cover it. He's questioning the free press over there. We don't have a free press in this country. They talk about the liberal New York Times and the Washington Post, but these, unfortunately, what has happened, and even the mass media, the radio and TV networks, they're owned by so few corporations now, they're controlled by so few people, that it's really to our disadvantage. We have a country here that used to be respected around the world. We're not. So it really is up to us to keep moving forward. It's a shame it's taken this many years. When we look back, $65 million was spent investigating whether Bill Clinton lied about sex. And probably 90% of the people in the country lie about sex sometimes in their lifetime. But yet they spent under $20 million investigating 9/11. And they were only forced into doing that by eventually the Jersey Girls and other people, like you throughout, that we did things. And that's appalling. I spent over a month and a half over in Europe trying to establish an independent commissions to investigate this. Just recently, and I'll get to my RICO, but about a month ago I put out a press release, and I personally had my staff send out 210 personal letters to every permanent delegation to the United Nations. And I basically said the United States of America made sure that they arrested Saddam Hussein, make sure he went to trial, and make sure that he got hung. And it's the obligation of the world community now to investigate, arrest, try, and convict George Bush and Dick Cheney and the rest of them. They belong in jail for treason and murder. And when I make statements like that, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. And so I also believe that if anyone in this country is being followed around, it's probably me. And whoever you are in here that's reporting back, I always say every day, hi, Dick, hi, George, because I'm sure they're getting the message. But the message is we're not going to stop. Together, and I hope that part of this is, I hope we really can backtrack, and this is an accountability conference. And what we have to do, and I passed out a leaflet, and I'll pass out some more at the end here, we have a responsibility to move forward. And what we have to do is unite on what we agree on, and the details that we don't agree on, please put them aside so we can move forward. There's dissension in the ranks, and I believe some of it is intentional by the Bush administration. They could have people in this room doing that, or doing that on the internet and questioning us. If we unite, and also I have a big argument ongoing, and I don't care if they're here, I'll talk to them face to face. The anti-war movement, the lack of respect for us, they want nothing to do with 9/11. And wake up, anti-war people. If you didn't have 9/11, you wouldn't have a war. So when they take that position, that they don't want anything to do with us, I really think, and I'll say it to their faces, that I think the top echelon of the anti-war movement there's Bush people involved in that, because without 9/11, you wouldn't be in Afghanistan, you wouldn't be in Iraq, we wouldn't have lost one life, and we shouldn't have, and it's a disgrace. And Bush and Cheney now are really trying to say, I don't care what you say. Dick Cheney was on 2 weeks ago, and he said, I don't care, we're going to proceed. They're arrogant bastards, and we got to get them. Also, I give a lot of credit to Kent, and he said he was trying to disclaimer. Look to your left, well, you're right. The American flag here, and read what it says. The United States Code, Title 4, Chapter 1, the flag, Section 8, respect for the flag. The flag should never be displayed with the Union down, except as a signal of dire distress in instances of extreme danger to life, liberty, or property. I have a flag like that on my desk, in my office. We should all do it because we are in distress. We have a real problem, and together we have to move forward. And I'm so happy that this conference is called Accountability. But keep repeating that in your head. I personally, and I don't think anyone in this room or anyone at this conference knows exactly what happened on 9/11. Okay? We have the ideas, we know, but we do agree on we were lied to. We agree on it could not have happened in the United States of America with the technology that existed in the year 2001 without our government either knowing about it, you either going to let it happen or did it. I believe we did it. But the point is, they lied to us. The point is, and I try, and I'll throw some things out just for a couple minutes, I know we're running behind. It's very difficult for the American public to accept the fact that their government did something to them. But back in Germany, that happened too. People didn't think that was going on before and during World War II. Okay? And what I try to tell people is, look back at some document on my website, which is around, it's www.911for, 911forthetruth.com. On the left there, and many of you know, Operation Northwoods. But that is a vehicle to tell people who don't want to believe it, here's a document that is now declassified. You can just Google it, Operation Northwoods, and I know I'm speaking to many of you that know about it. But we have to try to equate things because people are more interested in making sure their children get to soccer and basketball or the gas price for your SUVs. But the Operation Northwoods, just very briefly, a few that don't know it, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is the head military of branches, of all the branches, had a plan written down. They wanted to do it. They wanted to injure, our government wanted to injure and kill American citizens, destroy American property, to blame it on Cuba, to go to war with Cuba. President John F. Kennedy said no. If you don't buy the single bullet theory, that's one of the reasons, because not only Kennedy wouldn't go to war with Cuba, he wanted to bring the troops home from Vietnam. He wasn't playing ball. We have a very big power in this country, the military complex, because by being at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, companies like Halliburton are not only making, but they're stealing billions of dollars from us. And the military complex has to be dealt with. And we, the people, we can do something about it, and we have to do it. Because if not, what will happen with our children and our grandchildren and their children? And it's really upon us to move forward. I filed a RICO lawsuit. How I got involved, first off, on 9/11, I knew on that day that they lied to us. I knew that morning when they repeated that Andy Card, supposedly, but he said he whispered in the resident's ear that a second plane hit the World Trade Center and our country's under attack. And Bush's facial expression did not change. I interpret that meaning he knew. Later that day, I saw a newscast, and I saw a reporter saying, I'm standing here 5 miles from the crash scene in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Look behind me at the suitcases and other debris from that plane. Well, when a plane crashes, suitcases don't bounce 5 miles. By the next day, that story disappeared. We knew nothing about it, but yet by the next day, we had the photographs and names of 19 supposed hijackers. I could go on and on, but this information is helpful in the RICO suit. The RICO suit that I filed, and I'll tell you the status, RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. It was created in the 1960s to go after the mafia, or the mob. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, there's a mob in the White House, and with your efforts, we'll get them. For RICO to succeed, you needed certain predicate acts, including murder, and close to 3,000 people were murdered that day. And don't get me wrong, with the plane that went down Shanksville, the story came out that they were heroes. Everyone who died that day, everyone that was injured that day, everyone, they are heroes, and I'm not trying to take it away from them. There are also thousands more people who are affected by this, the New York police, the New York firemen, the volunteers, because of all the health hazards that existed in New York. And then Christy Todd Whitman had the gall to go there because they couldn't wait to get Wall Street open to say the air is safe to breathe. May she choke on that statement. In Washington, they said at the Pentagon you had to wear masks, but not in New York because they wanted to reopen Wall Street. I originally got involved in this. After that, I went on with my life, and then I got a phone call from Ellen Mariani, who was my first client in this. And Ellen had contacted, who you heard, the eloquent Maria Heller the other night here, radio talk show host. And she said, Maria, I have had 2 attorneys up to now, and I don't like how they're treating me. So I need an attorney with brass you-know-whats. And this is what she told me. She said, I need it, and she said what it was. And so Ellen Mariani called me and told me, and I began representing her, and I represented her for a period of time, and we filed a RICO lawsuit. For RICO, you need before, during, and after. Before is foreknowledge, which they definitely had. Failure to warn, failure to prevent, and cover up. There's no question that existed. And remember, Nixon went down on cover up alone. But there's no way, if we take a look at the events of what transpired that day, and in addition to using Operation Northwoods, I bring to people's attention Payne Stewart, the golfer. And most of you, I'm sure, are shaking heads yes, but for the few that don't, and when I mention the story, I'm sure you all remember. 1999, Payne Stewart's plane, he had was flying from Florida to Texas. When it was off course for several minutes, the FAA was notified. And the FAA immediately notified the military. And military jets came out, one on each side of the plane, and they followed the plane. It ended up crashing in South Dakota. But the important issue is they said if that plane was going to crash in a populated area, they would have shot it down. My question, and I use this, and I'm hoping you can use it when you're talking on the internet or talking to people in public, because people can identify with these. Then my next question, everyone, is where were the fighter jets on 9/11? And everyone shakes their head. Where were they? They weren't there, and we know why. I mean, I don't want to tell you the story. But this is a way of getting people involved. So I represented Ellen. We filed a lawsuit. The first lawsuit was about 90 pages long. I had never before filed a RICO lawsuit. We put together some brains. We put together. Then after a few months, we realized that certain other attorneys contacted me to offer their help. I have about 4 or 5 attorneys that are helping me around the country. Their position is they don't want their name on anything. They will never appear at a conference. They don't, because they really, and some of these are really due diligence, really working many hours to assist me. They're fearful for their life. I have one attorney who is the predominant writer of a lot of the material, and he said his wife is like scared to death and with and children. We're not, and we can't be. We have to keep moving on. I believe we have an obligation and that's what I'm going to pursue. So we end up withdrawing the lawsuit, and our second draft lawsuit, and Bill will understand this, in federal court you're supposed to short and sweet. Our second draft was 500 pages long. So as Ellen Mariani was reviewing that, because she said, please do not file again until I give you an okay, we decided that was too long. So we ended up, the next complaint we filed was about 220 pages with some exhibits. But Ellen started stalling out because, unfortunately, she got in an argument with her stepdaughter, and I can't go into more details than that, lawyer-client. But Ellen did, and many times we had a lot of coverage, we traveled around the country, the Stabilization Act, which was created within 2 weeks of 9/11. For the first time in history, our government, out of the Treasury, was paying people money through Ken Feinberg of anywhere from up to $6 million a family, from $100,000 to $6 million. We didn't do it for Oklahoma City. We didn't do it for slavery. We didn't do it to the Indians. We never did it. But they did this, they passed it. And the reason they passed it is, as Ellen Mariani, and I always give her credit, she called it hush money, because whoever took the funds from the government could not sue. So, and you couldn't even discuss it. And so therefore they said they're doing it to save the airlines, save the insurance companies. But why are we doing that, saving them right away afterwards, if we had nothing to do with it? But so it did. So you couldn't sue the insurance companies, you couldn't sue the Port Authority, you couldn't sue the airlines, and it's hush money. I think most people, I think it was 94 families did not take the hush money. So it limited down. Well, Ellen started delaying further, and I called Bill Doyle, and I don't think Bill's here, but Bill represents a lot of the families from 9/11, and he put me in touch with William Rodriguez, called Willie. And Willie and I joined together, and Willie filed as my client in the second RICO lawsuit. And we pursued for a while. Unfortunately, after the California conference last year, which I didn't attend, Willie decided to withdraw for some personal reasons. The case is not pending right now. It will be filed again shortly, hopefully in the next 2 months. I have a new plaintiff. I don't want to name him right now. The reason I'm going to go class action, that's just a whole other mess. And we've never had the right funding for it, but I'm working on that to move forward, because we have about 50 defendants there, and I'm going to get brutalized with paperwork coming back, as Bill said. But I am going to make sure that we continue to pursue these efforts, because I think it's one of the only efforts that we can do at this point. One other thing came up in the past couple of weeks, and it's on my flyer, that I'm going to try to file what's called a writ of mandamus. That's an extraordinary writ commanding an official to perform an absolute duty. And I really think that Elliot Spitzer, but unfortunately he now somehow got elected to the governorship of New York, he failed in his responsibility of not calling a grand jury, as did Robert Morgenthau, who is still the district attorney in New York City. So, thank you. So with the efforts from the Citizens Grand Jury or contacts from you, I think the effort has to be, and perhaps even a writ of mandamus in Florida, if you think about the anthrax. The anthrax was definitely an inside job, and it got hushed up. I mean, that perhaps a writ of mandamus there. So I'm going to be looking into that in the next few weeks, the next month. Also, over this weekend, we were talking perhaps the 9/11 Commission members should be added to my lawsuit, because they covered it up. There's no question. They're thank you. They're phonies, okay? My client, Willie Rodriguez, testified before the 9/11 Commission about the explosions in the building before the first plane hit, was not there. Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation, testified to what went on in the bunker under the White House with Dick Cheney. That was not in the 9/11 Commission report. And I'm sure there's many other things that weren't in that report, and it's a blatant cover-up. And they're all in cahoots together, and I appreciate any other thought process. I mentioned the letters I just sent to the United Nations, and I could go on and on and on. The efforts here, any suggestions you have, please give them. I am not the brightest guy in the world. You know, I don't know everything. I do know they lied to us. I knew we were going to get them. I have what many people don't have. I have what's called common sense. Common sense says we're on the right track, and we're going to get these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Phil's RICO case has been very, very important for the 9/11 Truth movement. He actually appeared on national television, which drew attention to our cause. Specifically, I remember he appeared on MSNBC, the Tucker Carlson show, in which Tucker's jaw dropped when Phil said at least 60 or more agencies or fail-safe systems would have had to have failed simultaneously on the morning of 9/11 for this not to have been an inside job. And that was on Scarborough Country. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Scarborough Country. Just there was a quick mention of the anthrax. It was an inside job. Who did the anthrax go to? The Democrats. Senator Daschle, who was initiating an investigation into 9/11. Senator Leahy, the minority leader of the Judiciary Committee, who was resisting the Patriot Act and the immediate implementation of that, which had already been written, and were looking for an excuse to institute it, and he was going to fight that. And to Tom Brokaw of NBC News. What do you suppose the communication was? Do not investigate, do not prosecute, and do not educate the American people into the crimes of 9/11. Do you suppose there's any reason, having received anthrax personally, that there might be a little intimidation and there might be a little reason by which people didn't pursue or impeachment and haven't pursued the case of 9/11? And that's the second thing I wanted to say about that, and that is few people know that Dick Cheney and his team and the president were on Cipro, the antidote to anthrax, 6 weeks prior to the supposed anthrax surprise attacks. It takes 6 weeks for Cipro to truly integrate into the system.
And it was taken again on the morning of 9/11.
And it was taken again on the morning of 9/11. One last just example. Of the six people who died from anthrax, do you think it's any coincidence? I mean, isn't it a strange coincidence that the photojournalist that first published the pictures of George Bush's daughter's DUI pictures against his demand that they not be published, he died as a result of anthrax? And he was the first that was attacked. How loud does it have to be that the president literally means what he says? That is, that you're either with us or you're against us. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. This is the crisis we're in, and we the people must stand together. I want to remind you again, from 12:45 to 1:45, we're going to be doing strategies here in the Clark Gable room, and that you can see this show again at We the People TV, and that's what we're doing now, which can be seen on helloworld.com/9/11truth LA. I want to introduce now. Thank you.
I can tell you.
Yes. The source? Come on up. Just say it.
The source of Cipro being taken into Dick Cheney's staff is Judicial Watch, which is not a so-called progressive, but a very conservative legal watchdog organization in Washington, D.C. Just go to the Judicial Watch website and you will read all about it. They've actually brought a suit against Cheney in the White House to come clean with the American public why they were taking Cipro ahead of 9/11 and on 9/11. The source for the journalist who died? The photojournalist died, Mr. Stevens, which is down at American Media Group in Florida. It was all through the papers. I mean, it was every paper in the United States. But I can get that for you.
Okay. Now I'm going to introduce Paul St. John, and we're going to complete with with Bill Veal here, who was seen in Improbable Collapse, in which he did a wonderful kind of mock legal presentation. But before we do that, with our friend Chris here, who is standing for the indictment of Vice President Cheney, and he's going to play devil's advocate and is actually going to take the position of Vice President Cheney against his cross-examination. But before we do that, I want to bring up Paul St. John, who has written an amazing open letter to the President in support of We the People taking action, and both the People's Grand Jury, we're going to be calling for grassroots action to take the presentments literally to standing grand jury members, to local district attorneys, state attorney generals, and members of Congress, and the Attorney General, and members of the Supreme Court, with the results that we the people have come to. In a parallel action, encouraging grassroots mobilization, empowering we the people, Paul St. John is going to be doing the People's Commission on 9/11 and has some exciting things to share with you about that real quickly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The formal name of the commission is We the People's 9/11 Commission for Truth and Justice. We've raised $250,000 to do this, and the hearings will be held over 4 days over the 4th of July holiday. We will be announcing to the American people, taking out a full-page ad in USA Today with a picture of all the people who are going to testify, and many people, Jim Mars and Dr. Jones, and people you already know who will be testifying. This letter will be contained, it's a letter to the American people, will be posted on our website, which says, Mr. President, in the course of human events, we the people have found it necessary to demand accountability, truth, and justice for our government. That time is now, and in the event has become known as 9/11. It has come to the attention of we the people that your duly authorized body of work, known as the 9/11 Commission, has acted in a corrupted manner, making a mockery of the public trust. This commission report to the nation contains, written in it, over 100 blatant lies, deletions, and distortions. As a result of this mockery of justice, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, have found it imperative to form our own 9/11 Commission that will function by and for the people. We have also found it appropriate to form a series of people's grand jury actions in order to investigate and adjudicate the many crimes spawned by the events and planning of the 9/11 crimes. In the future, your presence and cooperation will be respectively expected. Rest assured, Mr. President, that we the people do not consider the Constitution of the United States of America, quote, just another piece of paper. Yours in truth and justice, Paul St. John, Chairman of We the People's 9/11 Commission to Truth and Justice, copies to the American people.
Bravo!
The function of the commission will be to highlight and illuminate the many lies, deletions, and distortions that have been so thoroughly researched by people like Peter Dale Scott and David Ray Griffin and many others. And during this 4-day testimony, we will create a video notebook that will be available to, not copyrighted, and available to all the American people at just the cost of reproduction. What will follow this is even more important, and that is the 9/11 Truth and Justice Plan. If we don't have a plan to succeed, then we have a plan to fail. And the plan basically consists of this. We're asking each individual to make 11 copies or purchase 11 copies of this video archive of the commission trials. From that, you get in your car and you go down to your state senator and your state congressman. You make an appointment, and you ask him or her to review this information. As you know, when you have evidence of a crime and you do not report that crime, then you are complicit to that crime. So you also make an appointment to come back and review with other constituents. With the other 9 copies, you make a pledge to train, educate 9 fellow citizens who will duplicate this process, thereby enacting the laws of geometric progression instead of arithmetic progression. So you have 10 people who educate 10 people. Now you have 100 people who educate 10 people. You have 1,000 people. You have 1,000 people who educate 10. You have 10,000 people. You have 10,000 people who educate 10. And pretty soon everybody knows. So the plan is just important. I was very much buoyant by the fact that a state senator named Karen Johnson here has also agreed to testify, and she will be the last person to testify before I explain to the American people the 9/11 Truth and Justice Plan. We want to create a video documentation that for all the people who feel disenfranchised by their government, and more than 50% of the people don't vote because they think their vote doesn't count. And so with this, we invite people to become politically powerful, and in that way also segue into the grand jury system. And we think we can work cooperatively and efficiently and rapidly in accomplishing this. Thank you very much.
I just want to remind those who watch the video or are experiencing this on We the People TV that the actions that are being suggested here, including this accountability conference, stands on the shoulders of massive grassroots international citizen activity and independent citizen research, expert research. It originated in San Francisco, California. It moved up to Toronto, Canada. We had another in New York City. We had another in Washington, D.C. We had we had another in Chicago by various different names. It's We the People joining together to discover and reveal the truth. And now we're taking a stand collectively. From the Boston Tea Party, we're actually declaring independence, shall we say, and reasserting we the people's power to be the 4th branch of government to take responsibility. And I say we the people means us taking responsibility now. I want to thank you very much. We're going to take a few minutes and have a delightful, interesting, insightful, probably passionate, very stimulating engagement between a possible prosecuting attorney or a representative of the people who would be cross-examining upon a subpoena by the People's Grand Jury, and to Vice President Richard Cheney. This is a kind of a cross-examination, just a very brief segment of it. As Bill has said, this could go on for 3 days, but we're going to do it for about 5 minutes, maybe 7, and you'll get a flavor of it. And to shorten this piece of it. Okay, we're gonna need to wrap it up given our time. But again, this is Bill Veal and Carl Weiss, and playing Vice President Cheney. Again, he is committed in his real life to the indictment of Vice President Cheney, as we all are, on the crimes of 9/11 for misprision of treason, the conspiracy for mass murder, and certainly obstruction of justice, and perhaps many other crimes. But these are the ones we're focusing on right now. Thank you. Bill?
Raise your hand and be sworn. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Do I get a microphone?
Yes, sir, you do. Can you make sure this is on for the Vice President of the United States?
He doesn't deserve a microphone.
Is there an answer to the question, sir?
What was the question?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Is there a Bible?
Your Honor, could you direct the witness to take the oath?
Is there a Koran?
We'll just proceed, sir. We'll assume that when you raised your hand, you meant to tell the truth.
So help me God.
Have a seat. State your name for the record.
W calls me Vice.
On September 11th, 2001, you failed in your duty as an official of government, didn't you?
Am I allowed to have my lawyer here? I want Phil Berg.
You get to answer yes or no.
What was the question?
On September 11th, 2001, you failed in your duty as an official of government, didn't you?
What is your authority to question the Vice President of the United States?
Your Honor, direct the witness to answer the question, yes or no.
What is your authority? I am a sitting Vice
Sir,
President.
today I ask the questions.
I stand on the Constitution that I am not to be brought to trial in any court other than the Senate of the United States after being impeached by the House of Representatives, and that has not happened. To the disgrace of the House.
Is that what you told the 9/11 Commission?
I told the 9/11 Commission that I arrived at the PEOC at about 10 o'clock.
When you showed up at the 9/11 Commission hearings and you had your friend there, did you take an oath then?
The only oath I took then, am I allowed to say more than yes or no?
You say yes or no, and if you really need to explain your answer, you may. Did you take an oath before the 9/11 Commission, sir?
No. They never asked me, they never provided the Quran or the Bible.
Were the attacks of 9/11 an inside job, Mr. Cheney?
Do we still have a Fifth Amendment?
In your case today, sir, we're going to suspend it. You get to answer yes or no.
I refuse to answer on the grounds that it might tend to incriminate me.
Do you know what a psychological operation is, sir? We could only dream that a moment like this might occur for this democracy. The fact is that in a cross-examination of even Richard Cheney, he really doesn't get to say much more than yes or no, and you get to ask questions along the lines of, what's your explanation for the audio tape produced by Jenny Carr, which shows an explosion about 10 seconds before the first plane hits? You get to ask a question of him. What's your explanation for that? Now, were you there at 9:20 when Norman Mineta said you were running the country? Were you there? Or were you there at 10 o'clock when the 9/11 Commission report says you were there? Are you calling Norman Mineta a liar, sir? That's a rather involved and elaborate misunderstanding or misremembering of history for Mr. Mineta to say that there was this gentleman who walked into the room and kept asking you every several minutes what to do when this plane was a certain number of miles away from the Pentagon. Were you giving the orders then, sir? Yes or no? That's what cross-examination is all about. This is a moment in history we'll never experience, but we can consider it and dream.
They made me do it.
I would like to take just a few minutes to close this with my own personal contribution to this weekend. You know, we're dealing with factionalism between governments and other governments, governments and their own people, factionalism sometimes within our organization, but we're also dealing with a deeper factionalism in our own thinking, in the supposed disparity between our brain and our heart, between our rational mind and our intuitive mind. And this is from centuries of factionalism in our thinking between science and religion. And so right now, I would like to do a certain operation that really draws more upon science than religion. It's Sunday. It's a moment to just kind of collect ourselves. And this comes from my practice as an acupuncturist and doing what I call cellular meditation or breath chelation. In other words, we have breath. We're 98% energy and empty space, according to Einstein. And we can access this special psychic state that so inspired our earliest ancestors that they ritualized their whole life around this energy that they were so in awe of. And we've so gotten disconnected from. So what I'd like everyone to do is just take a moment, close your eyes, and I want you to blow out your energy. Blow out all the stale energy, the stale oxygen, and replace it with a mindful energy, which helps us to connect our endorphin system, which extends our brain not just up in the forebrain in our eyes, but connects with the aft brain, with the supposed lower brain, which is actually the intuitive, instinctive, and psychic brain. So by just breathing, everyone just blow. Close your eyes and just blow out all the stale energy, all the griefs and grievances and resentments and disappointments that go with that stale energy that clogs up the center of our body, so that we can replace it with our endorphins, which are the natural opiates that have receptor sites in every single cell of our body, and which constitute our intellectual, our emotional intelligence. And this is the intelligence that connects the psychic part. And the word psyche comes from the word breath. So when you breathe, when you blow, and please continue to blow while I'm speaking, just feel the energy changing, so that suddenly you can start to feel your brain through your nervous system connecting all the way down to your arms and legs, so that you feel the little psychic energy that is in every cell, this intelligence that is in the nucleus of every cell of your body. And you're connecting with the brain-like tissue, which are in the neurotransmitters in every cell of your body. So suddenly now when we speak, us talking heads, we are speaking with the real psychic energy in our heart, in our belly, our solar plexus. And that's what we can continue today to help promote the unity within ourself and the unity within our group, to help promote the unity of our planet. And so when you can draw upon that kind of psychic energy, it just enhances the intellectual capacity enormously. And it's something that we need to do every day. It's cycling the energy, just like we recycle our food and we recycle everything, and the planet recycles the energy of the sun and the moon. We need to recycle all that buildup, all that accumulation of stress and stress and all this energy to make it power, so that our pain becomes our power by blowing it through. So I just wanted to do that as a little invocation, our little Sunday morning coming together. Thank you.
Do we have a couple of... Okay, no questions? Okay. All right, great. Okay, we're going to wrap this up, and then I just want to remind you, as Martin Luther King, as we say, to complete it, and that is, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. It's time for us to stand up and speak the truth to power.
Thank you. Sorry I had to jump in there. We're about 45 minutes over on this panel. Anyway, I got some announcements to make, and the schedule has been changed in a number of ways. You need to look outside.